setting the sag on your suspension fork or shock can be one of the most impactful ways you can set up your mountain bike for you. But whereas forks can be relatively easy to see what percentage of the stroke you're using, quite simply because a 170mm fork largely has around 170mm of exposed shaft, shocks can be a bit more difficult. You see, RockShox SRAM, being the crafty beggars that they are, have patented putting markings on that shaft. Now, this isn't a problem for them because obviously when you're setting up a RockShox shock, you do have these very useful gradient markings. But the plot thickens a bit when you look at something from one of the other brands, say Öhlins, Fox or Marzocchi. They don't have these gradient markings. Now this becomes even more complicated when you think about a shock might have a 65mm shaft exposed, but to make this eye to eye, which is 230, fit as many frames as possible, they actually come with different stroke lengths, and inside of the shock there'll be a stroke limiting spacer. So your shock, although it might have 65mm of shaft, might actually have a 60mm stroke, so actually bottom out is there. Now this 5mm might not sound very much, but it can have a huge impact when setting sag, when a mil or two either way can have an effective difference. So let's understand how to negate this problem. Next, it's worth considering exactly how we measure things. Now, 2mm doesn't sound like much, but on a 50mm stroke, that is a 4% tolerance, which is, quite frankly, quite a lot. So when we're measuring our sag, it's really important we go from the inside edge of the O-ring to the inside edge of the seal. This will not only be a consistent thing to aim for, but it'll also be precise. The next thing we want to do is understand how much stroke our bike uses. So with the shock fitted to the bike, let all the pressure out and go straight to bottom out. Where that O-ring finishes will show us how much stroke length is used under a full compression. From there, we can measure it in millimeters, and doing some quick math, we can work out what, say 30% is if we're setting sag on an enduro bike. That will give us an exact figure to aim for in millimeters, which to my mind is a lot easier to consistently measure than aiming for some percentage. Having that number in millimeters will then make setup changes easier in the future, at least to my mind, because we can work out the measurable difference in a quantifiable unit rather than aiming for something like percentage, which can oftentimes feel a bit more vague. So that's understanding stroke length and how we take an informed approach to sag. But what about measuring the eye to eye of our shock? So firstly, this shock here has two eyelets, whereas some you might see have a trunnion mount. Those are a bit more complicated, but it's largely the same theory. What we want to do is take the perfect measurement from the center of this eyelet to the center of that one. Now that can be a little bit tricky, so just as a tip, what we need to think about is taking a measurement from, say, the outer edge on my left here, your right, all the way to a measurement of the outer edge again on my left here, your right. That, assuming you're going from the edge of the eyelet, will basically cancel out the distance and there's no more guessing where the center is. It will give you a very accurate reading. So that is how to accurately and consistently measure some key metrics on our shock. You've got stroke length, eye to eye, and of course, sag. Now, enough of me waffling on, turn your computer off, go outside and ride your bloody bike.